Hey y'all, I just wanted to do a quick, that's my dog, who just won't let me be great. You want to say hi to everyone, Mello? Come, say hi. This is our poodle, Caramel, and we call him Mello for short. Hey y'all, I wanted to talk a little bit about what some of my thoughts were around a post-coronavirus world. Not a world where coronavirus doesn't exist, but rather what our world has looked like or will look like now that coronavirus has happened. I think it is unique in that it is probably the most globally documented phenomenon ever. Because of the internet, we get to see so many videos and so many different perspectives. And I know that I have been on YouTube looking and listening and learning from other people's thoughts, definitely from economists, from farmers, from people who have really different perspectives and really trying to understand how to make plans for the future. One of the things that traumatic experiences does, it really puts us in a place where it makes future planning very difficult. This is something that happens in the brain, in our prefrontal cortex, that is responsible for a lot of our forward thinking and planning. This is something that we've known with young people who have experienced large amounts of trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder all across the world. When people are living through wars or in refugee camps, it really makes it very difficult to think towards the future because we're so focused on our present and we're not quite sure what the future is going to look like. I've been doing a lot of thinking and planning and just imagining what our world could look like and how to anticipate that and how to, really shift myself in a position to be ready for that kind of change. Keep in mind, I'm not an economist. I studied history and anthropology, have studied a lot of historical movements and large-scale traumatic experiences like the Holocaust or the transatlantic slave trade. And, the implications of things like that obviously have echoed into the future decades. And for something to be responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of people, I think we're at 200,000 people over the globe, and the possibility of those numbers being underreported is pretty significant in human history. So even though we've seen a lot of people downplaying the importance as saying it's just the flu, even the global response alone shows that this is a pretty significant event and something that we all have to consider in our lives. So we're lucky that we get to hear experiences from people all around the world, from Italy, from China, from Germany, really getting to describe what their own unique experiences are. I see an emerging tension, a tension that has already been present between a call for universal basic income and increasing automation. So I teach a class to a group of students, and we talk about redefining social work and talking about resourcefulness. And one of the things I've been bringing up in that class for the past year or so is increasing automation. And for people in the social work sector, I think it's important for us to consider that. And now, even more so, particularly because employing humans obviously runs the risk of people being sick. I remember I was in Chicago and I was staying in a hotel, and they literally had robots bringing you, the things that you asked for in your room. So if you asked for, some new towels, robots would come up to your room and bring you your towels. I've lived in California before and living around Silicon Valley. So, you've seen those self-driving cars, you've seen the drones, you see a lot of the different kind of technology that is beginning to be implemented and has been implemented. And it really is just a matter of time before those things become more prevalent in other places. And I remember when I was at that hotel, I was talking to the manager and he was describing to me, when I was asking what is it like working with all these robots? And he said, it's great. Obviously they don't complain. They don't talk back. They never get sick. They always show up for work. And he laughed, and I thought, but what about your job next? The greater automation means less employment opportunities for so many different people. Historically, people have been able to have a career as a cashier and put their kids through school. I know many people whose moms and dads were cashiers or worked in supermarkets and were able to have a substantial enough income that they could take care of their family. Now, with the elimination of a lot of different jobs because of automation, I think that one of the things that we are going to see is an enduring unemployment rate. Right now, I think in the US, the claims have gone up to about 26 million. And so we won't totally know what the implications of that will be until the dust settles. I know that we're seeing more opening up of businesses across the US, more states opening up. I do think that that has a lot to do with not wanting people to apply for unemployment. As a response that businesses have to develop to coronavirus, I do think that their investment is often going to be in automation, in robots, in any sort of system that allows them to be less dependent on human labor. And we are seeing, again, this back and forth. There are more governments who have been discussing universal basic income, which I think is important. We know workers at Whole Foods, at Amazon, and a few other companies are all going on strike, to protest the ways in which they are not receiving the benefits that they need, not receiving the protections that they need. I think that that's great. I think unionizing of employees is really, really important for people to be treated safe and to be fairly compensated, especially in a time of crisis, especially in a time where we're all saying these people are heroes, but 6 to 8 months ago, people were arguing that these same heroes did not deserve $15 an hour. So which is it? It's important for us to understand that we are going to see a lot of workers, the workers who are frontline workers, the workers who are deemed as essential workers, being able to unionize and fight back and say that they need more protections and support in the industries that they're in, that us calling them heroes, I think I read an article about this, but us calling them heroes often just makes us feel better, but doesn't actually tangibly, compensate them for what they're doing. And I think both of these issues will continue to be enduring issues over the next, 5 to 10 years. And when I think about this post-coronavirus world, that is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking not just in the next, 1 year to 2 years, because we know that that's how long it is going to take for a vaccine to be safely developed and disseminated, 1 to 2 years. The World Health Organization has made it clear that we're still very much in the beginning stages of this pandemic. And I think many people are dealing with their own issues around it, and it can make it feel like, oh, we just want it to be over so bad. But based on the evidence that is being shared, again, what we understand so far is that it is going to be 1 to 2 years before we can really see a vaccine or maybe meaningful treatment that can help us abate the spread or abate the way that the illness is attacking the human population. The second thing I think is going to be a really big issue are mental health issues. I think that in a lot of ways is really going to be the second wave of a lot of the impact of coronavirus. We've seen an increase in domestic violence rates. We've seen an increase in divorce rates, particularly coming out of China as the lockdown has abated. We have also been seeing, studies and statistics describing that people are saying that they're not okay. It is a lot to experience, loss of jobs. Human beings aren't really supposed to be locked up with each other that close for that amount of time. Kids, I can't imagine the impact that children are going to be experiencing as a result of this. Loss to their friends, a loss to their schedule and their routine. Routine and schedule is incredibly important for children. I think as adults, at least we have the capacity and the language to think about some of these things and to figure out how to process them. But for children, especially very young children, they don't have the range, And school-age children to lose their school or to be forced into online learning and education. I think that even though online learning obviously is a really great way and a really great tool, it is not a complete substitute for human interaction, and it's still a picture. We're still just looking at pictures of each other. This doesn't make up for an absence of physical touch, right? Human beings are very social creatures. We are all very social creatures. And I think obviously there are varying degrees of what people need. Even introverts, I think at this point, are struggling. See that tangibly and lots of other kids too. Even when we have, virtual play dates with other people, those are helpful and they're wonderful, but we have to also remember that even though online learning is wonderful, as is evidenced by YouTube and other platforms like this, and Zoom and Skype and FaceTime, those are still pictures. They're not actually people. And as much as, again, I don't like the opposition of like online and offline as being, real life and fake life or anything like that. I think that can often be really ableist, because for a lot of disabled populations, accessing most of the world online has become a way of life. So again, I think we have a lot to learn in general throughout all of this from some of our most vulnerable and marginalized populations. Indigenous communities, disabled communities have a lot to share with us about how to navigate the world in this way. I think for some people, they won't really experience the depth of the traumatic damage until maybe years later. So I think that going forward, access to therapists, to mental health support is going to be increasingly important. I always talk about Talkspace as an app that I really like that provides online therapists that can be really, really helpful. But I think making sure that those things are financially accessible to people will become incredibly important. It is still a large scale, huge impact to us to lose physical access to a lot of people. And I think particularly for the folks that I know who are living on their own, when I ask them about how they're not okay. You know, not being able to hug or even just be around physical people is difficult. And I think there are a lot of things we maybe took for granted, you know, going to a party, going to a fete, just being able to be around a whole group of people, all listening to music and dancing. I think that also is, you know, number 3 is one of the things that we're really going to see is a change in the way that we experience each other in public spaces. Already, I've noticed that with the difference between calling it social distancing versus physical distancing, when we go outside, people are less likely to want to say hi, they're less likely to make eye contact. That part of keeping a physical distance for people has really meant, again, a social distance. And I think that is going to obviously impact the ways that we share physical space with each other. Even with the openings in some states that's happening, Texas said that, you know, movie theaters, restaurants can only really maintain 25% of their maximum capacity, which you know, makes it very difficult for people to be able to make rent and to pay wages because that's based on often a full or consistently relatively full occupancy. But even places like gyms, you know, will require greater barriers, will require more space, and just genuinely thinking about people as vectors for carrying a virus creates a different kind of distance between one another. And so I think that this is obviously going to really impact dating. It already has. It's going to impact the kinds of relationships that people get into, knowing that if we do have to go back into a lockdown, that this might be someone you would be quarantined with for a while. It might change the kinds of relationships that we have. It might change the casual nature of some relationships. It might make things more serious. But definitely, I think we are going to see an enduring change to the ways that we share physical public space with each other, as well as the way that we relate to each other. Number 4, local economies and an increase in barter. Because we are going to see large rates of unemployment, we don't know exactly how high that unemployment will be, but because we are going to see, and we are seeing a larger rate of unemployment, I think that bartering will become more prevalent as a way of people being able to access the resources that they need, which is going to be very interesting, obviously, to see how that happens. But when we see people growing gardens or whatever resources that they have access to, we're definitely going to see people trading. That is already happening in the building that I live in. I know someone traded me puppy pads for some masks. More and more, we are trying to figure out directly what we need and bypassing a need for money. I think also as a result of the inflation that we're bound to experience because of the way that money is being disseminated and a stagnation in wages and an actual output, which is called stagflation, I've learned. That too is going to mean that savings accounts, the money that we have access to, is going to lose value and will again mean that trading and barter will become increasingly important. And the final thing that I think is going to be incredibly important in our post-coronavirus world is housing. So being caught in your house for extended periods of time, I think, is definitely having people reevaluate where they live. And cities, especially, you know, living in any major city, I've lived in New York, I've lived in LA, I've lived in San Francisco, living in Toronto, super small condos, super tiny, very expensive condos in all of those cities, or super tiny apartments that are very expensive in all of those cities. I do think we will see a push to rural spaces. You know, I think people, especially with kids, I know I've definitely been considering that. of trying to be in a space where if I was forced back into a lockdown again, that there would be enough physical space for everyone to run around, for our dog to run around, for our whole family to be able to have more space and to have more outdoor space that is a little safer than we can access here. Especially in cities, it's really difficult, as we know, to maintain a 6 feet distance on super small sidewalks. So keeping in mind that we may be forced into various periods of small quarantines or lockdowns over the next couple of years if the virus does flare up again. That might not be the case. It may be very different the way that we are relating to each other, but our home has become even more important knowing that we are spending so much more time in it. So I do think the way that our homes are functioning will be different. I think also those open space plans may actually shift, being able to have your own room and having private space in a home that you're sharing with a lot of people, I think is going to be incredibly important. I do think that we actually, will see a huge shift of people moving to places where they can access more space and places that are maybe more reasonably priced, knowing that a lot of people are losing their jobs and access to jobs and higher paying jobs may be very difficult to come by. So those are some of my thoughts about what I think a post-coronavirus world could look like. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your ideas about what you think it could look like or how you feel like it's impacting you wherever you are. So leave a comment down below. Thank y'all so much. Please stay safe and healthy and be patient and forgiving with yourselves during this time.